The CDC has started the PACE Incident Management Support System. This system will support the identification and proper treatment protocol for the current pandemic sweeping through the east coast of the U.S. The World Health Organization has offered its support, stating, addressing a forward-thinking program that will identify and assess key needs for those within affected areas will be the linchpin to properly containing the disease and preventing its spread, as well as providing information to those within these areas which can only assist in that goal. Members of the CDC team are already on the ground in Atlanta, Georgia, and it's presumed they will also be arriving in the northern states within the next 12 hours in key areas and begin to share information with the public on proper protocol and treatment. At this time, they repeat that avoidance is the primary method to prevent the illness, that avoiding anyone who is sick is the only real way to deal with this outbreak at this time. Many critics have stated that what was originally thought as a quick solution has created a lackluster response and that the rulebook has officially been thrown out. This could clarify that the situation is more dire than first surmised. At this time, we've received no clear assessment of how the illness is spread or how it originates. The initial concern was based on a drug interaction that could possibly spread something similar to rabies, but the narrative has not been mentioned as part of the prior few announcements. One of the biggest concerns to news and media sources is the sheer amount of information that has been submitted regarding the events now headed into their first 24 hours. From citizens being warned to avoid public water systems, over-the-counter medications, to extremes such as fentanyl and heroin interactions, or the concept that the infected are dead and have been reanimated in some unknown way. The CDC has stressed the need to deter spread of possible misinformation, and media platforms have taken some action, but they admit they cannot contain all of it. It has also been difficult for news, political representatives, and health officials to address all the information being received. What originally resulted in power and phone outages in some areas was quickly reconciled as power returned with a flood of new reports that quickly became overwhelming and difficult to verify. There is also the concern by those living in affected areas that these problems could return or persist, further hampering the knowledge about what to do next. Simple instructions of using small radios has been insufficient in the eyes of the populace. We've seen in the last few hours a mobilization of National Guard forces to capital centers in Atlanta proper and Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, to attempt to create a uniformed response. While these areas are escalating, areas like New York and Chicago are informing residents that they have the situation well in hand and that concerns are more minor than what the news sources have reported, and the citizens should not overreact. Psychologists have risen concerns over what they're calling toxic reactions fueled by hyperbolic reports that could lead to hysteria, that the situation is not as high a priority as it's being reported. They explain this as hearing similar news over and over and prescribing it to different areas could present a narrative of larger scale. We've seen this many times in media, one professor at Harvard stated, like War of the Worlds, information is repeated by many sources, and there is an assumption that the scenario is all-encompassing, when in reality the situation is localized, he said. This concept of hysteria is not far-fetched, and unlike an attack by a single known attacker, multiple infected could potentially force repeated reports of attacks that could, for many, seem to be encompassing without linking back to the original story, making it seem much more serious. With some channels now saying they intend to cover these events 24/7 until they are resolved, it could only serve to exacerbate an already tumultuous situation. This hyperbolic thinking would seem to be endorsed by on-scene reporters who have conveyed they've seen little or no activity, shelters empty, and some have never even seen an infected person, questioning why the need for any lockdown. They added that the more intense an event is, the more opportunity for it to become hysteric. The need to avoid the illness becomes paramount. In truth, of our response is more concerning than the affection itself. This could lead to an increase in calls to first responders that leave them stretched beyond the staff capabilities and responses to events that simply don't exist. This has also explained the increase of security in some areas to deter vandalism and looting, where citizens have been asked to close their doors and stay home to avoid possible danger. Break-ins and alarms across Pittsburgh have increased. Citizens are already asking to lift any stay-at-home orders, which could identify that people are seeing little activity and would like to go back to work protecting their livelihood. Officials say that even with this information, that they should take each step slowly and calculated to limit risk to citizens. That even if these reports are hyperbolic, that the reaction could still be a concern. Citizens in many areas have gone to arming themselves to defending against would-be attackers and are not well trained to identify sick persons with symptoms mimicking other illnesses, creating a potentially problematic reaction. Giving time to return to a normal schedule means understanding the full effects of the illness. The area that it involves and an increase in knowledge allows a better, more controlled response by all involved and avoids hysteria. Hotlines in these areas have been set up to help those that have been affected by anxiety or stress by providing psychological support while reinforcing that information will be relayed to the news stations as it becomes available. This is why it's so important to make sure you are kept up to date on any news, official or otherwise, with the goal to verify anything we receive to make sure that you are made aware of the accurate information. After receiving this report, we plan to be more vigilant on the news we share with our audience to make sure we don't pass any misinformation. We hope that others will follow us in that